Good afternoon, everyone. Apology for the delay. It was like session after sessions. So I'll invite, let's move to the session directly. For digital tool for DER management, I'll invite Mr. Balwant Joshi, MD, Idam Infrastructure. He is going to chair and moderate the session. Please, sir. Now I would invite Mr. Ravindra Kadam, Advisor-Renewable Energy Central Electricity Regulatory Commission. Welcome, sir. I would now request Mr. B.B. Mehta, who is Director, GRIDCO, Odisha, to come on the dais. Now I would request Mr. Abel, Director General APUA, please come to the dais. Thank you for joining us. I would request now Mr. Sujith Nair to come to the dais. Okay, see. Frano de Silva, please come to the dais if you are around. Mr. Frano, he was around. Okay, not here. Arshi, Chadha, please come to the dais. Now I would request Mr. Harneet Kanwar. Harneet is, okay, please come to the dais. Seva is around, I think. We are missing Seva. We have slipped on time, so directly we'll go to the session and then I have a theme presentation. Welcome everyone on board. Theme session, theme presentation. उसका एक लगाना इधर सबसे उधर हाँ ऐसे ठीक है I got it. Thank you. हो गया. This is the presentation. Thank you everyone for we are getting your name printed. So I'll invite Seva. I'm just getting the arrangement done, and then I'll request you to come to the dais just for a second. Thank you everyone for joining us. I'll do the theme presentation, and then I'll hand over to our moderator of the day, Mr. Balwant, and then we go ahead. The topic of the day is very interesting. So I'll be talking about the framework for National Registry for Solar Rooftop in India. India has over 11 gigawatt of PV system connected all across the discoms, and that is on 33, 22, 11 kV lines, and which operated by different system operators, that SLDC, RLDC, and LDC. But there is no visibility that on a real-time basis how much being generated at which place, which discom, which feeder, which transformer. So that is one of the biggest bottleneck wherein to understand that how much capacity we have and on runtime basis how much is being generated. The daily generation is more than 40 gigawatt from this distributed PV plants and not being considered in the daily generation forecasting scheduling. So all the rooftops what we have, mostly the smaller scale rooftops, 1 kilowatt, 2 kilowatt, 5 kilowatt, 10 kilowatts. When we started this, we could not connect all the rooftops to our system wherein we didn't have any, we have mechanism, but we could not figure it out that how to connect it and how to remain with the generation part of it on runtime basis or on real-time basis. So the basic fashion of billing is every month end we would understand that how much billing is done, and then the billing will be settled by the discom. But on day-to-day basis, we would not understand that which panel has generated what, and we are missing on two things. One, that we are not accounting the solar part or renewable part of it while we are purchasing energy or selling energy in terms of forecasting, and we are missing on the how this can actually be a cushion to the grid at the time of peak load, and how better we can efficiently utilize it. So to envisage fast scaling up a rooftop PV system in the country in this coming years, to monitor generation, a feeder-wise, discom-wise registry that has been envisaged, wherein we have a very clear picture of how on a national scale we can create a system. We took up a pilot project wherein we are trying to create a national registry for rooftop, especially for rooftop, though this can work for other DERs also, to understand that on daily basis, at least to capture the details. Most of the discoms have their own mechanism or own way of storing data and recovering it whenever it is required, but they are like very fragmented, and there is no standard available wherein we store data and fetch data whenever it is required. So we took up a pilot wherein we are planning to create a national registry system to understand that how much being is generated and how much energy is being consumed by DERs. So we are trying to develop a framework for designing a rooftop PV registry. The architecture, data fields, API, it would include everything. And this will be designed discom-wise and feeder-wise. I'll explain that how the entire architecture looks like, and then going down to the lower scale wherein we understand that which is the consumer, what is the generation on daily basis, and then what we do with the energy that is being generated. This will also let us understand that what efficiency we are getting from every rooftop of every DER that is the part of the system. So we have missed this bus also, wherein one has to understand that whatever infrastructure we have set up, whether this is working on the optimal efficiency or we have lost the vision. The outcome of the pilot is state-of-art SRT PV registry for the country and scaling up of the solar rooftops, then real-time performance analysis, generation forecasting that will help us here, efficient grid infrastructure management, increased generation of SRT PV system, reduce electricity transmitted to local feeders, consequently lowering the distribution losses. So kind of wherein we are trying to understand that how we can co-locate the consumption part of the DER side, wherein we locally generate and locally consume, what will help us reduce the distribution losses as well. ISAF is working with BIS. I mean, the more technical part of it is we don't have any standard for the inverters that are connected to the grid, wherein all the inverters are cross. So we are working on adopting IEEE 1547 as a standard in India, wherein we have a control over inverters putting there. We understand the health of the network, and then we can use it the way we want to use it. With the smart inverters, real-time monitoring and control, that is the bigger part of DER, that will be possible. And most of the cases when there is no light, we stop feeding back to the grid. That is one technical challenge, wherein maybe this standardization will add a little more value to it. The national registry dashboard framework will look like right from the national level. We are going down the regions, and then there can be states, union territories. Under a state, we can maybe one estate wherein we'll have DISCOMs, and then within DISCOMs, one DISCOM. Within one DISCOM, there are several zones, and then there are several circles also, and then within circle there are divisions, subdivisions, and then there is the classification is based on substation as well, wherein one subdivision may have several substations. So to keep the counting, we again go down by feeders, then distribution transformers, then customers, and then SRTPV capacity. So this kind of framework will give a very clear picture that on feeder basis, how much energy is being generated and how much energy is being transported to the grid. The dashboard would look like the PV wind, and the important point is we have started this as a solar registry, but we'll keep the provisions for considering it as a DER registry. Tomorrow, any sort of battery storage, that can be solar, that can be wind, that can be local storage, that can be EVs also when we go ahead and get into the vehicle to grid part of it. So all of them can act like a DER. So we'll keep provisions wherein in future we shall be able to integrate all the components in one application and work with it. The dashboard would look like this, the number of installation rated capacity addition in previous year. So this will give us a picture wherein how we are progressing, that how much capacity on monthly basis, on daily basis. This will give a better visibility to DISCOMs wherein they will understand, though they have data, but having a dashboard will help them understand that how quickly we are growing up. There is international experience in this space wherein we had several discussion with AEMO, Australian Energy Market Operator. They have mandated rooftop registry, and they started way back in 2019. Now they are upgrading their rooftop registry to DER registry. So we thought, let's not make the same mistake, or let's not start from where it was started in Australia. So let's keep provision for other DER components also, wherein when the time come or when we get mature in terms of the entire system, then we can get them also as another components in the system and leverage the platform what we are creating on a bigger scale. So when they started, they had 120 data fields that had to be incorporated in this system, this DER management system. So they started with 120 and then they boils down to 51. We are also exploring the way how many data points are essential and then what we can consider in maybe in first phase, and then we can go on the second phase and utilize the same. Maybe we can prioritize that what can come first and then later on, depending upon the value addition in this entire system. So now, before anybody or audience asking questions to us, I have a couple of questions to ask the panel. That the development should, we are going ahead. We are in the process of creating a system wherein it will help understand the DER integration at a national scale. But the development and should be limited to RTPV registry or to expand to include the other DER information. Again, this is a matter of debate wherein we can understand that whether we can go keep provisions or we can go for a full-fledged system and then modify it and according to our purpose. Another question is which agency of GOI should be responsible for maintaining the registry? Because on the part, maybe this is more relevant to DISCOMs, equally relevant to SLDCs also in terms of all DER accounting, equally relevant to RLDC also, maybe Grid Controller of India also, because on a national scale, they would have the visibility that what is happening in India in terms of DER. How data collection and data entry of existing RTPP systems can be managed. So every DISCOM have their own mechanism of storing data. It is not yet standardized. So can we think of standardizing? Obviously, it's like a couple of parameters they store and then they fetch it when it is required. But there is no standard format. And so can we think of a standardizing a format wherein we store the data? You're very much open to use it the way you want to. But when we are trying to integrate all the states in one national registry system, so we must have a standard platform and wherein the information can be quickly integrated to the system and then we can leverage the information and to make decisions. Which platform registry should be hosted? Should it be NIC or any, being a public data, then again the security concerns and the regulatory concerns also. So this we can host it on NIC. Again, there is another round of complications wherein you start working on a government platform and then trying to fetch data to make your decision at a central level. So that is also debate what we can do and then finalize that which way we have to go. So with these questions, I am handing over to Mr. Balwant for the panel discussion so that we can conclude at the end of the session. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Anand. Good presentation on the efforts being made by ISGF on creating the National Solar Registry. Also, thanks a lot, ISGF, for inviting us, all of us over here for this wonderful session, very pertinent session in terms of the current developments that are taking place. Very recently, Prime Minister announced a very big solar rooftop program, 1 crore households to be provided solar rooftop systems, a good amount of subsidy, 78,000 rupees is not a small amount for 3 kilowatt system. So, and someone will have to manage. Even if we assume just 3 kilowatt comes up with those 1 crore households, we are talking about 30 gigawatt of capacity. Minimum one.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I am here to invite one of our speaker, Seva Panda. I would request you please come to the dais and then we can continue. I'm so sorry to interrupt you in between. She is heading the software innovation at Ador Powertron. Thank you.
No problem. So, welcome to the panel. Yeah, so we are talking about 30 gigawatt of capacity only through this program. And what is going to happen is that because of this 30 gigawatt program, there is going to be a lot of rub-on effect. And because of that, a lot more systems would come up. Also, what would happen is the government of India has liberalized the norms for open access. We talk about green energy open access. There is a movement to actually further ease out the regulations for net metering. So net metering regulations, multiple business models are being considered: net metering, gross metering, VNM, GNM, BTM, lots of alphabets. So all these models would come up, which would actually encourage more renewable energy. Second development that is taking place right now around us is the crashing of battery prices. From $300 per kilowatt hour, which was there around 1.5 to 2 years back, today we are already talking about $120, $130 per kilowatt hour. So that is going to make batteries hugely competitive and certainly solar plus battery competitive against the grid tariffs in many cases. So if you look at industrial tariffs, commercial tariffs, in most of the states, 80% of the states, the solar plus battery would be viable. Of course, one will have to think about whether solar plus battery can run the system independently and the business models around it, but that is something that is bound to happen. The presentation which Anand made particularly focused on the distributed renewables, but the title of the session is the distributed energy resources. And when we talk about energy resources, we don't talk about only renewable, but also other resources, right? So we talk about a demand response, which is going to be very important energy resource. We are going to have EV charging, which is again on the demand side, but not on the supply side. And the third one is electrification. There is a huge movement of electrification of everything, what we call. So cooking is, of course, the very easy, low-hanging fruit to electrify, wherein the induction cookers would come in. So, so electrification of transport, electrification of cooking, certainly going to happen. Battery storage, EV charging, certainly going to come up. And as a result of that, we need to have a look at, in a holistic way, the issue of the entire DER or distributed energy resources. Anand rightly mentioned in his one of the last slides whether we should talk only about renewable energy or we should talk about other resources also. Obviously, we need to talk about other resources as well. So we have a problem, upcoming problem. Thankfully, it is not a past problem, like a lot of having standard generation capacity. But this problem is certainly going to come up, and we have to deal with it. And to discuss the challenges which this particular problem is going to throw at us, we have got a very eminent panel which ISGF has put together. We have got representatives from the regulator, system operator. We have got international experts over here on the panel. We have got technology developers, startups, and each one is bound to look at the problem from different sides. So it's a kind of one big elephant in the room, and we are touching different parts of this particular problem, but we will try to figure out how the elephant looks like and how we are going to get the elephant out of the room, right? So this is something that we will try to do. In terms of the presentations, I understand Arshi has got a presentation to deliver. Is there any other presentation? Yeah, okay. So we have got good number of presentations. So I think I will give first honor to lady next to me. So please deliver a presentation. So Arshi runs, I think, couple of startups, and one of the startups deals with distributed renewable energy resources, how to really monitor the generation, how to monitor their performance, not only, I think, renewable, but also she looks, her solution looks at chargers also, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, over to you, Arshi.
Thank you. So, Mr. Balwant has given a bit of an introduction. I would like to thank ISGF for the opportunity. ISGF has really supported throughout my ventures. So, to give you a slight background, I've been working into solar, putting solar rooftops. So we have over 500 plus rooftops. So I firsthand understand that when there is such massive volume of distributed solar, the visibility becomes a major issue. And also the demand pattern of an individual consumer. So this is one of our consumers, as you can see. So during the daytime, the one who has put solar is exporting about 10 kilowatt of power. And during the night time, the scenario flips and they are consuming about 13.8 kilowatt of power. That is just one car. The consumer is already going to buy another EV. So when we talk about India, it's not a single consumer, it's millions of consumers. So if millions of consumers are going to face the same pattern, then we have to realize that our traditional systems were never actually made to support these kinds of fluctuations. So DER will determine how the patterns of power system is going to work. Since there is a midday load and there is an evening demand charge, so these are massive loads being penetrated into the grid. So there has to be a solution a software platform that can actually orchestrate these loads in symphony with our infrastructure. Right now, for our capacity building or our short-term power procurement, this is a massive amount of power that is being ignored because we do not have a real-time monitoring or a visibility of what this power can do. All we know is a capacity, but we do not know what kilowatt this capacity is particularly able to contribute into our grid. So we believe a DERMS software will be able to navigate India through its solar and EV surge. No, DERMS, a software like this, would promote solar, would help the DISCOMs to have ancillary services where they can actually take care of these services for the end consumers, and obviously renewable energy maximization. We don't want to stop renewables. We want to be able to more accommodating and make our grid more resilient. So this is where the Trillectric was born. So our approach is an end-to-end system. We are a software and a hardware platform where we would integrate this platform for an aggregator to make informed decisions, where they will have a visibility of all these loads in sync with the grid. So we are a completely agnostic platform. We would try to accommodate, we would try to integrate and collaborate with the earlier systems. This will just be a layer below the already SCADA system. So they will actually account for these loads and make sure that in the capacity, renewable will never become a problem. Our solution is can cater to various aggregators, whoever cares about how solar is doing. Our solution will give them a service. As a DISCOM, they can use it for capacity planning. They can use it to maximize renewable generation. For an aggregator, they can monitor, they can maintain these assets. For an NBFC or any lender, they can assure that these assets are performing well. We can actually, for the end consumer, since we have been facing the end consumer, even the end consumer has spent so much money on solar, they do not know whether it's working or not. So they would also want somebody else to at least make sure that since they're promised 25 years, but at least that product should work for them for another 12 years. These are the few case studies. So our platform is being used by an NBFC right now. They are using it to, like, for their risk minimization. They can actually rate their vendors, and they can roll out the loans. And we are also using it for solar maintenance. So we have a scheduling platform where we can have, whether it's a DISCOM, whether it's an aggregator, they can provide proper maintenance to these end consumers. So the future of energy, we believe, will be a symphony. It will not be a solo, where prosumers, utilities, everybody has to work together. And Trillectric or a platform like DERMS will make sure that every note is perfect and every transition is seamless. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Arshi. Really interesting solution and homemade, so that is even better. So now I would request Harneet ji, if you can deliver your presentation. I believe he's going to present the DERMS solution and again also the challenges which DRs are going to face.
My presentation. Sure. Presentation is not there. G. नहीं है इसमें.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope I'm audible to everyone in the room. I would like to thank the dignitaries as well as the ISGF members to invite me for this session. I'll be presenting to you a tool we call as Solva, which evaluates the value of distributed solar and storage. To give a brief introduction, what Solva does is it's a web application which undertakes a basic power flow analysis. The Solva tool can also help you to evaluate the network as well as societal benefits from the integration of distributed solar and storage. Additionally, we can also use the tool to identify system sizes interconnection points, and dispatch strategies to optimize this value of distributed solar and storage. How does Solva do this? Well, there are two basic functions that happens in the tool. The first one is the power flow analysis, and from the power flow analysis, we find out the active power as well as the voltage profile. Secondly, what it does is we have a methodology that determines the value of distributed resource. We bifurcate this into network benefits as well as societal benefits. I will explain each of them briefly to begin with, and how a power flow or a network is created on Solva. This is an example of an HT feeder line or a HT feeder network, where you can see there are 3 interconnection points. That is the sending end, the middle end, and the tail end. The sending end would be closer to the point of supply, while the tail end will be closer at the end of the feeder line. The 3 interconnection points gives us opportunities to introduce DER, and as you can see from the diagram, the DER is introduced here at the middle end. I would like to point out that the load on the feeder is aggregated on the tail end and the middle end for the analysis. Further on, moving towards the methodology that is used to determine the value of distributed resource, we have taken some existing research or an existing study that has been conducted in India in the context of Indian power sector, and we have determined a value, or we have taken the methodology and developed a new methodology where we find out the network and societal benefits. The details of these benefits, or how are they calculated, the methodology is provided in the link below, and I can share this to you at a later point of time. But briefly, you can see that the network benefits include avoided cost of energy, avoided distribution capacity cost, avoided transmission and generation capacity costs, while the societal benefits take into consideration the avoided pollutants from the integration that is being proposed. The total VODA benefit, that is the value of distributed energy resource, is the sum of the network as well as the societal benefit. What is the data that we require here? This is the table that gives us the data that we use in the tool to give you the network and societal benefits of the integration. We would require a load profile. We have designed the tool to accommodate 8760 points representing each hour in a year. And we have done this taking into consideration that this could be the easiest format that could be uploaded on the tool. Additionally, we would need a state level net load profile, solar capacity addition in that state for that particular year of analysis, as well as the marginal cost that you want to replace or consider in the analysis. Here I would like to point out that we take into consideration the state level net load profile and the capacity addition in the state for that year to calculate a capacity credit, which then gives us a close approximation of the value that can be avoided by this integration. To discuss and show how the results are generated from the tool, this is a summary of the results that is being generated. As you can see, we show 4 parameters of comparison. We show the percentage of voltage violation as compared to the BAU case for the year 1, and the average distribution percentage loss as compared to BAU case. We take into consideration what is the peak, that is the peak capacity being taken by that infrastructure, and also give suggestion on how capacity upgradation would be required for this infrastructure. How we propose the capacity upgradation is that we consider 5 instances in a year where the peak capacity has been violated above 90%, and this value can be set in the tool. If we cross 5 violations or 5 instances we find are violating the feeder capacity or the capacity of your infrastructure, we propose an upgradation. For example, in this case, as you can see, the BAU year, we require the upgradation in the first year as well as the 17th year from a 25-year period analysis, while the integration of a DER on this network has deferred the second upgradation by 3 years. Further on, we also provide a load profile where you can see in the dark line we have highlighted the load. The light green line is the grid contribution in the DER case, and the blue line is the grid contribution in the BAU case. As you can see, for the 2 days that are being represented on the graph, we see that the DR integration has reduced the grid dependency in this case. And how does it impact your voltage and your distribution profile? On the same days, you can see that wherever the integration has happened, and in this case, as it is solar, we can see that the voltage profile has improved and the distribution losses have been reduced for those particular days that are being shown. Finally, we also give a breakup of how a network benefit and a societal benefit is being considered in the tool. We see the contribution of each of the parameter and finally give you a total voter benefit that can be considered and that can be taken into consideration by multiple dignitaries or entities who can make decisions on integration of DER. Finally, I would like to talk about the future possibilities of the tool. One of the applications that we think of the tool is that you can assess the integration of rooftop solar on the network. Additionally, you can also set location-specific feed-in tariffs. This will help us determine different feed-in tariffs for different locations and help us take benefit of the integration, while the policymakers can take into consideration the societal benefits and see what is the impact integration of DER can do on the environment and how we can save the external cost to the economy. The utilities can also map out feeders or that are available for solarization and share them with the developers so that they can start proposing installations on those feeders. With how the tool can develop, we are also interested to partner up and see if we can build capacity by training utility engineers or operators to use this tool and estimate what is the hosting capacity on that network. We would like to see an upgrade to include a multi-level analysis. We would also want to account for behind the meter into the analysis as well as some demand response technologies. Finally, we think that we would like the tool to build and share data among peers so analysis can be carried out at different places remotely using this tool. That is all. We have other multiple tools as well. One is a rooftop solar calculator that can do an economical analysis for you. The other is a land use tool which considers GIS data to show you the potential of what could be developed in the land that is under the analysis. Thank you very much. That is all. Yeah.
Thank you, Frano. This is an excellent development. I have got quite a few questions, but I will reserve them after the presentations. So, may I request Harneet ji, hope your presentation is now there on this.
Yeah, hi. So, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you, Smart Grid Forum, for giving us this opportunity to present our thoughts on how to get the renewables and how to reduce the carbon reduction. So, I'll just start with the one saying that grid is reaching an inflection point. If we don't accelerate innovation, the grid will become a bottleneck for energy transition. So, we have to put innovations, we have to have solutions. Renewable is already there. We don't have to wait for somebody to do something. We are the ones who have to do. I'm Harneet, as Sir has already told. I am the regional leader, sales leader for Grid Vernova, for GE Vernova. GE Vernova, we are part of GE Digital Group of GE Vernova. We are very proud to say we are part of Edison Group, and we have a legacy of almost 130 years in power generation and tools for facilitating the smart movement of power. So why DERMS? Why now? And how to solve this problem? So whenever we talk about DERMS, whenever we talk about renewable, whenever we talk about new generation technologies, we always intend to reduce the carbon reduction.
carbon reduction can only be solved by two possibilities, like Balwant already rightly said. We have to increase the electrification, we have to increase the renewable penetration. Small, big, large, hardly matters. So these are the two main focus areas to reduce the carbon reduction. So as the more renewables come into picture, more electrification comes into picture, basically there are three challenges which we see. First is the network capacity challenge. So more renewables into the network, we face more network challenges. Second is new electrical patterns. So initially what we used to see, there is a generation goes to the transmission level, transmission to the load. But now scenarios have changed totally. The generation is not happening at the transmission level, it is more at the distribution level. We have more solar renewables, we have more rooftop solars, we have different technologies of demand response, the virtual power plants. So there are some different patterns which are happening into grid. And what these different renewables are creating problems is a backfeed of generation. Why backfeed? Because as you see on the right side, there is a house with the rooftop, and this house is generating, but it is normally catering to its own load. What happens when during the day when the people are out and there is no load in the house? So it is directly injecting back to the grid. So conventionally, when this distribution network was designed, so the transformers, the breakers, the other network, other electrical equipments, how they were designed was to work in one way, that the generation is happening and it will feed to the distribution network. The power flow was always on one way. Now the challenge is that distribution is generating so much that is backfeeding to the transmission grid. So these are some of the new challenges, new patterns which are happening. Plus the third most important challenge are there are new stakeholders into the picture. There are new regulations which have to be brought into the picture to cater to these new challenges. And all this leaves us with two main questions. How to allow more distribution energy onto the grid while keeping the lights on for everybody at minimum cost. And second is, for grid operators, are DRs only creating problems, or are they even solving some of the problems? This is a very important question. We'll take care in our next slides. Again, some of the challenges which DR bring with it is that electrification is happening at a rapid stage. What we are predicting, electrification the demand will increase almost twice or three times by 2050, and we'll see a lot of new generation, not only generation but loads, new type of loads which will come into picture, which will increase the load at the rapid stage. Second challenge which we say is, as I explained in my previous slide, the generation is going to go upside down. We always used to generate and distribute through the loads. Now the loads are generating and putting it into the grids. And we have different types of new generators. DRs is demand response is generating energy. VPPs are generating energies. It's totally changing the whole scenario, electrification scenarios. Third and most important, the weathers are changing rapidly. We have seen 70% more weather events in the past 4, 5, 10 years than what has happened in the last 20 years. So going forward, what we see, renewables will play a major role in not only keeping those disturbed areas lit, but maybe in future they might be a key important contributor to giving a black start to the complete grid itself. And most important, the last point, fourth point, is the cyber security. When we talk about smart inverters, when we talk about more monitoring of softwares, putting at the distribution level, at the generation level, at the RE level. So the major issue comes is the cyber security. How much secure should your grid be so that it can not only acquire data and it can be more secure and sustainable. So I'm not here to pitch any of my products, but this is one of the solutions which we recently developed. It's called the Grid OS. It's not a operating system, but it is a grid orchestration software. So orchestration, a word, very interesting word. It comes from musical instruments. You have orchestra and you have multiple instruments, and they are working in harmony. So that is where this particular word came from. We have multiple subsystems in the grid, and they can collaborate together and work in single harmony. So that is how this whole concept came. So we are trying to operate in all three parameters, not only in network planning, energy planning, how to operate the grid at a real-time system, and at the market level itself, how the small generators can trade into the power into the market and how he can self-sustain. This particular platform is built on zero trust cyber security. The cyber security, why we call it as zero trust cyber security? Because it is built in, not bolted on. Normally, conventional cyber security norms, they work on a pattern that we have a fiber wall kind of a net, which is set up between the external one and internal walls. So we think our system is very secure. But we have seen in the past, major of the threats have happened internally. Somebody did literally sabotage the system, or maybe a virus or a Trojan is sitting in the system waiting for the things to happen. So the system which we have designed is so encrypted that it exchanges data on encryption level between application to application. So we work on zero trust technology. We have federated grid data fabric. So why we call it federated grid data fabric? Because we don't believe in multiple different silo systems. Initially, the whole system happened was the distribution had its own database, transmission had its own database, GIS had its own database, OMS has its own database. So what we are talking about is one database, one thing, and it will work across all the systems. So one system will act as a I'll just touch more upon DERMS. So this will just give you take you back and understanding on how the traditional DER systems used to work. If you see on the right, this is traditionally for the transmission operators. So what transmission operators, whenever they felt that there is a huge load and they are not able to cater to that particular load, they used to ideally either curtail those demand or make a load shed. So curtailment was ideally done by a demand response sequence. The partnering systems were given compensation of that, and they were very happy in doing so. On the other hand, when it comes to the distribution operator had a visibility of some solar generations, maybe some the networks which were the generation which was coming in, and they used to maintain their own their own network, and they were very easily operating in a very siloed fashion. The transmission was working in a different silo, and distribution was working in a different silo. So here what we have disrupted is we have introduced the grid DERMS. So grid DERMS works as a single platform which enables and facilitates and gives more power to the grid operator to have the visibility of the DERs actions which are happening. So it maybe a distribution company can by itself run a DR, keeping in mind where the rooftops are not there, where they can actually curtail the load, and where they have more solar and they can feed and support the other customers in the grid. So there is one where the DERMS, grid DERMS comes into picture. And one of the major challenges which comes in DER optimization is whenever there was a system installed at any site, the software which was installed or the SCADA which was installed or delivered by the OEMs to those sites, they always tend to optimize their own generation so that the customer can be benefit more. Same was the case with the VPPs. VPPs, when they aggregated multiple sources, they also tend to extract maximum out of their the existing install bases, and they used to inject maximum into the grid. Nobody in this scenario thought about the grid, how the grid operator is behaving, how he is facing the challenges, and to transfer this power, where to utilize this power, whether this power is required at that particular time or not. So when we developed this solution, we thought about the grid operator, and we positioned the grid at the top level and gave him absolute visibility of each and every asset which was connected in that particular network, and to have a better visibility and control for grid management. In grid, why we say grid OS? Grid OS is the leader in grid DERMS because we do a seamless integration with SCADA, DMS, EMS, and not only at the SCADA, DMS, EMS level, we do integration even at the smart inverter level. We are independent of any make, any model, any this thing. So we try to empower the grid operator more and give him a better visibility of the complete network. And why we say we are leaders is because of the major utilities, the leaders, which the companies globally which are standing with us, using our solutions, and are truly happy using the G solution. Second, why we propose a grid OS is it's an open to any DER. We are not limited to any, just two more slides. So we are not limited to any, that we will only integrate the solar, or we will only integrate the wind or any VPPs. We can integrate any DER in place. Second, it's scalable. So when we deliver a solution, when we work with our valuable customers, we try to tend and sell them a solution. And if they are not ready for the complete package, we give them a part of the solution, and they can scale it as per their own pace. So that is the benefit they get, and it is powered by the Grid OS. And lastly, we are very proud to say that Grid House has ranked us #1 DERMS software globally. That's on from our side. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you, Harneet. Quite comprehensive solution, I must say. Will be very helpful for the utilities. As all of us know, the DERs is a very local problem. The problem, in fact, if you ask the utilities or the system operators in different states, they would come across with the DER as a different types of problem in every area. And so it's what we see in here and what we see in Africa is bound to be a lot different. So let's try to understand what problems which Africa is kind of facing with the DERs. We have got with us Director General of Association of Public Utilities in Africa, Mr. Abel Tella. So I would request him to deliver his presentation.
I would like to thank again ISUW for inviting me this year again. I'm glad to be here for this benchmarking with Indian. utility and player, the energy sector. As you know, we also are facing a very exponential growth of population. The 2 billion people are not expected for 2050, but 2040 with the trend now. So with this, the 54 countries have very different level of development, so the utility are. So while some countries have already universal access with all type of sources on the grid, some countries have less than 10%. Some countries are very big in surface and population, so are very small. So how do you combine all this to make the African sector? So, of course, this slide. So, distributed generation, yes, it's happening. Of course, it's happening. And for the last miles, to reach the last miles, we need to use all solutions, all technology, and in condition to face this population growth and industrialization. Because you know that Africa is a giant in mine, but in energy poverty. How do you leverage this? So, excuse me. The global trend, according to the International Energy Agency, when you look at the LCOE and the development of solar and so on, you can understand that the price are decreasing substantially, and then from 2015 to 2030, the distributed generation is going very up with utility scale, because we experience it in many countries in Africa where they say, okay, we separate rural electrification for utility, we separate renewable energy agency from utility, but that doesn't work. The population needs power, whatever it's coming from. So facing this, utility are now involved in distributed generation. So when we have to separate in block, we started by Southern Africa. Well, you see, South Africa alone had more than 273 megawatt peak per month average. And we have launched a program for Southern African country with the utilities. And we launched this program last month with the intention to have the utility involved in the distribution generation. Of course, you cannot talk about distribution generation if you don't go back to regulation. Absolutely needed to involve the regulators. Because Africa's history is that we started reform in the 80s without any regulators. Later on, the regulator came on. Now, many reforms have collapsed because not on the legal base. Now, at this stage, regulators are in place, regional regulators are in place. Therefore, we need to adapt the regulatory framework to the global situation in every country and at African level, because APUA is operating at the African level. We have 57 members in Africa. So what is required that we need the utility engagement and to adapt the operation to this new sort of connection that is not common grid operation. So for us, we know that The last mile, like I say, will cover with all type of solution. And the advocacy that we have, that energy power sector should be priority in every country program, economic program. We are very proud that last COP28 outcome fit with what we are telling. We say that no base load, no renewable energy promotion, or you collapse. So for some country, it will be nuclear, some country, gas. And in Africa today, one of two countries, matter half country in Africa have gas. So this will allow us to promote the intermittent renewable energy. And also, we need to build a new model of utility, resilient utility, to adapt all those solutions and to combine with the operator or the field who are not utility, but we build a resilient network to capture all these solutions. So for us to break this situation of mine giant and energy poverty, we need to combine developing energy, electricity, mining, local process, and trade. For that, we launched the African Continental Free Zone Trade Area, and also in June 2021, the African Single Electricity Market. APUA is in charge of developing this African Single Electricity Market with the power pool who are developing the market in every region of Africa. And now we are on the coordination of those activities. So with this, we support distribution, distributed generation, promotion to make the whole network sustainable. Thank you so much.
The problem that we face in India and the problem that we face in Africa, totally two different set of problems. And the co-development of the mining, energy, trade is absolutely imperative in many countries in Africa. We'll come to the policy regulatory question a little later, but before that I would request Dr. Seva Panda ji to deliver her presentation. She is Head of Software Innovation at Ador Powertron. So look forward to hearing.
So, yeah, hello, thank you, and I really thank ISGF to allowing me to present something here. So this is an initiative taken by ISGF, and I'll go the traditional way, like this is what we were doing. That is conventionally what we were doing is generation, transmission, distribution, and we were doing this with a framework in India, which I think in the previous, everybody knows about it, but I've just listed it down because this is the conventional way. And we will be working within the same framework to improvise when we have a grid network. So in smart grids, I think this is a word that has become a norm now, thanks to ISGF. That's the prosumers. That is the people who are consumers are not necessarily only consuming now, we are also producing. So you have a lot of, all the panelists have been talking about it, so I won't go too much on this. But the idea is now we have something smart, we need to do something different so that we have inputs coming in from things or devices or agents that were earlier just consuming. So how do we, so what is it that, I think most of them also talked about the necessity of having a DER and registry. So the initiative taken by ISGF is that you have an aggregating portal which speaks to what Arshi said and what Solva said, so that we can have a framework which is basically integrating with all the endpoints and also the DISCOMs or any of the points that is having an API or giving us data. And what is different about it is, I'll just go ahead and tell you how we are doing it and then let you know how it is different. So what do? We collate all the existing rooftop or any other energy data that is coming from these end devices, and collate it in the in a frame in the database. And we design a workflow, because when you get data from multiple sources, how do you know that it is right? The main point of any registry is that you have data that is correct and which is going to give you something that you can find patterns, which is going to give you some valid information for analysis. So we are, along with ISGF, I mean, they are the main people who are putting in all this brainwork and integrating to make a workflow so that the data that is there into our databases is correct. It's only then that you know that whatever analysis you're going to get or the patterns you're going to find is going to be right. So we are going to put that into place soon and create dashboards and reports and use AI tools to identify patterns and anomalies. And who's going to help? As we have already discussed, the DISCOMs, the region people in the government, the vendors, the consumers, everybody is going to be able to get valid data that is going to help them make strategies and plans. So I'd like to, in this, the main point that we are trying to bring out here is we already, in the previous talks that we had a very nice presentation by Sujith talking about the backend protocol, where we have an entire infrastructure that has been tested, like UPI, we have CoWIN, we have made large-scale platforms and frameworks where the data has been collected and it has been corrected so that we can make some valid decisions on the basis of it. So in this process, we have decided to use an infrastructure framework that has been used for CoWIN that is called as the Sunbird RC. So we have investigated and found that if we use frameworks like this, the aggregated data will be, we are trying it, but it's not a 5-year plan, it's a 3-month plan. So that's the difference that we have when we try to put our heads together and use something that has already been working. So we are using that, and the other rest of the thing is a standard application that you develop or a DERM platform that you have. So the difference that we bring is using the platforms that we have in our government frameworks. So this is just one thing that I wanted to bring out, that we already have the Sunbird software architecture, which is having a framework which improves your registry and makes your data. So there's a framework of check validation and verification. So maker-checker algorithm is put in place so that the data is correct. And we plan, not the last part, the verification part may not be relevant to us when we are talking about energy, but at least the first 2 parts would be relevant, and we will be using that in our portal. So ISGF has put in the effort, and we have started the work on this, and we have our first homepage. So it's the www.india.registry.in. And this is something that is a work in progress, but I have a few slides for you to let you know that we are ready to at least integrate with other platforms who have the data. So this is the DER registry, and we have a working login page which will show you something. I think it takes some time to load. I wanted to showcase the first page to you all. I think it's fine. So it looks something like this. There might be a network problem, so I'm not loading it. And the analytics page would give you a generation of exactly what the other people had wanted, but we are just waiting. We are hoping that the data that comes in will be valid. So you would have the graphs telling you how many solar plants have been installed, generated, and whether you have been going along with what your targets are. So for example, this is something, a view of the map where you would have the state, the DISCOM, the circle, the subdivision, and feeder, and the consumer, prosumer would also have a login which will tell his exact data that he has. This is how you will validate his data. So if you have schemes along with the policy and regulation which helps the person who's at the endpoint, who owns that solar, to validate the data, I think this framework would really be useful to everybody. Yeah, I think that's it. I just wanted to inaugurate the first site.
Yes, thank you, thank you. This is not only amazing, it's mind-boggling that to expect that all the solar rooftop or DERs would be registered at one single place. So thank you for presenting this beautiful work. Now I would request Sujith. You know, he comes from a little different background, more from the protocols, the kind of work that he has been doing in FIDE. So I would request him to present a little different perspective of the same issue. Thank you.
Yes. All right. Clearly the dispatch has not worked. My presentation is not here yet. While that's coming up, let me, and thank you, sir, for giving me that introduction. Wonderful to be here. Good afternoon, everyone. So I definitely don't come from this space. So I want to come here and have the privilege of ignorance of not understanding many of what is being said, but also come and tell you a story about how India has a high chance of doing this very differently than anywhere else in the world. Because we have been doing this kind of story quite often, and I think far too many times now. And I want to come from that perspective and talk about how energy landscape could potentially have an India model that I think is quite possible, provided we all work together and make it happen. And before I say that, I think two things that I think I spoke about in the afternoon as before the lunch. I said two things I'm passionate about. The idea of internet and how India is building such ideas, building many internets as we speak. And that's what India has been doing for the last 10, 15 years. And the only perspective I thought would be that I can add to this conversation today about India's adoption of DERMS is having this fundamental appreciation for scale. India is a huge, huge country. And if India has to move the needle on clean energy, India has to do things at population scale pretty quick. And we have to understand the notion of scale very differently than perhaps what the rest of the world thinks. And I'll give you two, sort of like a story, two varieties of scale that we normally end up with. One is I call the garden variety of scale. Now, if I were to ask you a question, I know it's post-lunch time, so maybe a little bit of a quiz. If I were to tell you between a garden and a forest, which one has more scale? You would say forest, right? And does forest scale naturally? Does forest scale automatically? And surprisingly, garden has a gardener who's curating. Forest has no gardener, it continues to scale. India's model of scale will be that of a forest where scale feeds into scale at a phenomenal rate. And have we done that before? Yes. Since 2019, India has been doing that model of growth for quite some time. So I spoke about the examples. For the audience here who probably missed that, it's quite startling if you think about where India was in 2009. In 2009, we had iPhones, but India's banking penetration was less than 20%. Startling, isn't it? 17% banking is what in the country as big as India had. And in 9 years, we managed to go from 17% to 85%. 9 years. That's a mind-boggling number. No country could have done that at that scale. In fact, there are studies globally which say that any country to make that leap would have taken 5 decades. Pretty much not in our lifetime. India did that in 9 years. That's one data point. The second data point, India was largely cash. Can you tell me last time, our Indian friends here, when was the time you used physical cash? Here? Yeah, what do you use these days? UPI. UPI was not even existent in 2016. It was just getting started. 0 transactions. India does about 12.5 billion transactions. That was a number it did pretty much last month. In 6 years. Now you understand the forest and scale difference? Forest and garden difference? India is building forests. 12.5 billion transactions from 0 in 7 years. We do more transactions in India than whole of MasterCard does in the whole world. And we know how long MasterCard has been around in the world. This is a UPI story that happened in 6 months. And these are all fundamentally reimagining how we accelerate change at population scale. There is a fundamental reason why we are all sitting here and having a conversation on green, acceleration, DERMS and all that. None of this matter if we do this very quickly and at scale for a country like India. And it means we need to kind of create a UPI kind of effect. How do we create that UPI kind of effect? Well, I'm still waiting for the presentation, but let me just go through it anyway. So what India did not build solutions. digital solutions. India built what is called the digital public infrastructure. There are three heavy words: digital public infrastructure. How did it do it? India, okay, for example, what is physical infrastructure? Can Ferrari make cars if there are no roads? Will there be school buses if there are no physical roads? When you buy a Ferrari, you don't get a designer road, do you? The roads are shared public infrastructure, and they are shared. I don't build a private road for me to take my daughter to school from my home. We use roads, and we all know when you put a highway through a village becomes a city, a village becomes a town, town becomes a city. Physical infrastructure actually catapult economic development. The problem, however, in the digital world was that we never built infrastructure. We were building these solutions, garden variety solutions. You know what is the e-commerce penetration in India today? 300 to 400 million people in India use UPI. Guess how many people buy things online? We are okay to spend money online, but guess how many people buy things online in India? Less than 5%. And it's not that Flipkart was born yesterday, Amazon just arrived yesterday. They've been there for a decade and a half. Ubers and Olas less than do 3% of mobility. And that's the problem with the garden variety of scale. India needs the forest variety, the UPI variety, which penetrates access at a rapid scale. And for that, we need to build digital public infrastructure like the physical roads, one public infrastructure based on open standards and specifications that accelerate market adoption, both public and private innovation. The reason I'm here talking about, and I know I didn't want to take too much time here, I just want to keep this perspective that India is building an open energy internet as the digital public infrastructure for energy. If you have an internet for energy transactions, micro energy transactions, we believe India can create several DERMS to accelerate adoption, make it easy for every discom company, and this is the time we have to stand up for every energy company who have been in the traditional business sense, essentially forwarding energy from the first mile generation sources to the last mile. Now the supply is coming, the generation is coming in the last mile, and they're not prepared for that. We need the power of technology to augment capacity of all the energy companies in India to accelerate adoption of decentralized energy, solar, rooftop, and all of that. And that requires a different model of thinking. It requires a digital infrastructure like a UPI. By the way, I don't know how many of you know, UPI is just a 1.5-page standards that has created this revolution of 12.5 billion transactions in 6 months. And why is it? Because it's not a solution by itself. It's not an app. It's not a platform. It's a standard that has spawned many such apps. PhonePe, Google Pay, BIM, UPI apps, there are 200 such apps, all the banks are there, literally catapulting innovation and creating micro payment transactions at scale and at speed. If you're really serious about accelerating decentralized energy, green energy adoption, making the grid low cost, clean and reliable, we have to think about doing that as a population scale. India is not here doing pilots for next 10 years. India has to get it done in next 10 years at population scale. And if that has to be done, we need to start thinking about what is called the digital public infrastructure. India has done it several times in the last 10 years. Adhar is a story, is a phenomenal story. We made that banking story go from 17% to 85% because we did not take banks to villages. We took banking to the villages. We put branch in every phone. The cost of creating a bank account has $0.01 today in India, and India moves money through UPI the cheapest in the world. If you can't create that low-cost adoption as an infrastructure and allow private innovation, we want many DERMS solutions to here to accelerate that, and that's where, coming directly, asking this question, do we all believe that we need that model of growth for India, a DPI thinking for clean energy transition? And my essential story is, there's going to be a tremendous explosion in all the three boxes. New form of demand is coming, batteries are going to come. Over the lunch, we are having a conversation about creating a battery digital wallet, explosion of batteries, explosion of EV adoption, explosion of EV charging companies. I spoke about it before lunch, yet less than 5% utilization. Each platform has less than 5% utilization, and then we have all these IPPs and solar and community solar, rooftop solar also exploding through the roof, how are we going to manage this without bringing them all together and helping the grid manage all this and accelerate the adoption? And that's where this whole fragmentation that we're going to see, this decentralization, distributed energy assets, we need to unify them. And to that effect, we are saying, there are enough startup innovators. We heard all the presentations here, fascinating solutions that are coming. But for all of them, we need one tide that raises all these boats, and that one tide is a digital public infrastructure in the form of an open network. I don't know if you've heard of ONDC as a project. I'm one of the co-founders which is doing that for commerce, deepening the access of commerce, because India cannot be at 5% digital commerce. It has to be 30, 40, 50%. Can we do that for green energy? And that's an effort we're doing with some of the effort that I'm involved in with an open stored UPI-like standards called Beacon Protocol. Beacon is 2 pages, not 1.5 pages like UPI, but essentially a standard. And this is a standard that carries all other standards with it. It is a transaction market expansion standard. I don't want to get into the technical details, but we need one tide that raises all the boats as an internet, as a network, and that's what I'm here to talk about. We are already doing about 3,000 EV charging transactions on this grid. Good double-digit megawatt of EV happens on an interoperable grid. There are big EV charging companies that are doing it. There's an energy bank. We know the value of storage in solving for reliability and low-cost energy being mainstreamed for processing demand. We have an energy banking, virtual energy warehouse coming on this grid where the virtual energy warehouse does not own a battery. He does not own a battery. He's going to ping an idle battery over the network, an idle battery of a school bus or an idle battery of a local community solar, and make it available, monetize that idle battery and make money, all because there is a common grid which reduces the cost of distribution, cost of transaction, reduce the cost of ecosystem for the country. And using open standards, it's all free. It's been free since the time we wrote it. Nandan Nilekani is the philanthropic co-founder along with me doing this, and we intend to do this at scale. And we want to have a conversation on energy. We are having these conversations across different parts of the world. Amsterdam, for example, we're having a conversation on community microgrids with this protocol on Beacon, but solving for multiple aspects, multiple use cases, whether it's demand response, whether it's battery monetization, whether it's peer-to-peer transactions under the DISCOM, for micro transactions, maybe under 5-10 kilowatt. All of these are different use cases on a common internet fabric. This is not a blockchain. It's just a bunch of open standards. It's technology agnostic. Some parts of it can be on chain, doesn't really matter. But it's a way of thinking to accelerate ecosystem adoption. I'll stop here. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Sujith. I would say revolutionary as well as radical. You know, I actually wish you all the best. I hope, you know, we are able to make it. We are able to replicate what we did with the UPI, now with the energy infrastructure. So thank you. Now moving on to my other panelists. We have very eminent persons on the panel. Mr. Mehta, decades of experience in managing the grid, earlier at Gujarat SLDC, now at Odisha. How do you really see, as a system operator, distributed energy resources? And whatever you heard in terms of aggregation, in terms of having one single public infrastructure, are you getting goosebumps or are you getting scared?
Sir, good afternoon. Actually, Sachin Tendulkar ke batting ke baad kuch bachta nahi hai. So things has happened like that. But let us come to the reality. We have the renewable source with us, maybe a distributed renewable energy source. We integrate it. Sabke ghar pe rooftop solar is there, it has been integrated. Who has to manage the show? The management of the show is limited up to the distribution company or the utility with which it is attached. The deviation takes place between the distribution utilities settled through some DSM mechanism, intrastate DSM, etc. So, do we bother much about how many diesel generators each person has or each house has, and we transfer that information right up to Delhi, national level? The answer is no. Do understand, renewable is necessary. Distributed renewable gives lot of advantage to the DISCOM. but it will be managed by the DISCOM at their level itself. There has to be an eye on that. Today, 3.3 kilowatt rooftop solar by residents in Vadodara, I am able to monitor in my mobile. So that has to be percolated up to the distribution system operator level, which is being planned or probably formulated or unofficially in function at various distribution companies. It has two things available with them. One is a offline data, means how much rooftop solar has been allowed, because the meter is issued by the DISCOM. So they are quite aware about in which feeder, in which distribution transformer, in which grid substation, the rooftop solar or a small scale solar, ground mounted solar has been permitted. Then DISCOM knows the pattern of the solar behavior in his area, in his domain, in his terrain. So they are able to anticipate the probable generation out of that. And they will counterbalance with the other source of the energy. So things is good, working fine. Problem arises when it is much more than what it can be digested. What is happening? The distribution network right up to your doorstep in the society or at the apartment has some trivial capacity of the transformer. If more than that is installed, then they have to change the infrastructure which will push the power back to the grid. So there one has to take a look on that. So that is also being considered by the DISCOM at various levels. So point is that we need to harness the renewable energy. We need to have an accounting thereof, a precise accounting of each and every rooftop solar is done as on by each and every DISCOM because they are giving set-off. Here this word is dangerous, set-off. What is happening generally? Who put the rooftop? The person who has a house, who has a kothi, who has a bungalow. He is elite class of the society. He pays 4,000 to 5,000 rupees a month a consumption bill to the local distribution company. To curtail his bill, we give him some subsidy. Matter doesn't end here. If you feel you can give him some money, 1 lakh, 2 lakh rupees. What happens at the end of the day? Sir, during the daytime, the rooftop inject the power to the grid. DISCOM doesn't need it. We have seen 2-3 charts also. We need to cut the daytime requirement and we need to shift the load to some other part of the day. Let me honestly admit, we don't have time of the day tariff for the distribution or a DISCOM level or a small residential consumer level category. So whatever he inject will be accounted in a monthly energy meter. It will be set off with his own consumption at the end of the day. What happens during the evening? They operate 3 air conditioners. Apne ka hai, pitaji ka hai, bachcho ka hai. For which the poor distribution company buys power at 12 rupees, buys power at 10 rupees. And the elite class of society of people gets set up for that energy. He doesn't pay anything for that. So this is something like cutting your leg, killing your leg with a very sharp saw. And by giving subsidy, we are making it more and more sharp. A personal opinion from B.B. Mehta, you take 1 lakh rupees, never put the rooftop solar. I will be pleased if I have to operate the DISCOM. But anyway, our mission is not that. We need to leave a less carbon footprint or a zero carbon to next generation after us, my children, their children, their children. So we should not stop the harnessing the natural resources. Let him generate. But he should settle block by block. If he cannot settle, it will be a free power to the DISCOM. Never give a set-off for the entire 2-month billing cycle, 1 month billing cycle. If some of you know the Gujarat Solar Policy 2019, we have big massive expansion for the solar, for the industrial category also. They don't have roof, but it is a ground-mounted solar. What we did is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., whatever you generate, you consume there. Beyond that, whatever you consume, you have to pay the industrial category tariff for that industry. Even on the statutory holiday, maybe a Sunday, maybe a Tuesday, maybe a Wednesday, whatever solar plant of that ground-mounted solar generates, that will inject free energy to the local DISCOM. We have to see 2 things at a time. We have to see the sustainability of the DISCOM, as well as we have to harness the green energy. Now, things doesn't stop here. Sir has rightly pointed out that our discussion should not be limited up to the distributed energy resource up to the solar only. EV is also one of the component, or the demand side management is also one of the component. I will tell you a very simple, very funny example which has happened in one of the state in the country. That people thought that there is a large gap of requirement of power during the off-peak hours. Maybe a 5,000 megawatt less demand drop was there between the 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. So we thought to put one special category of consumer. Those who use during that part of the period, they will be pay less energy consumption, the tariff will be less. It was floated successfully. Regulatory Commission endorsed the same. At the end of the day, after 2-3 months, we analyzed that what has happened. There was very less significant rise during the consumption of the power during the off-peak hours. But what has happened? The DISCOM which was getting the revenue out of that, they started falling the revenue. Because there was no addition of the consumer in that time. And those who were already using, they started paying less. So then it was analyzed how it has happened, why it has happened, who is the right man for that. So people do not want to compromise on their natural habit. Nobody worked during the night. So we cannot attract the people to operate at the inconvenience hours, and we will not able to shift the demand. So maybe an academic exercise in the IIT or NIT may be explained that it can be shifted here or there, but practically it's not so easy. We can add one more example. Say the EV is a very big bandwagon. Today, every day there is a seminar, advertisement, practical road show, even the energy department of all state government take for the EV. Let us take a simple example. My wife is a EV two-wheeler. She simply comes back at 6:30 and plug it. What happens? It is a peak time of the DISCOM. DISCOM is buying the incremental power at 12 rupees. So we are adding fuel into the fire. Is it possible that she switch on at 1 o'clock midnight? Answer is no. So before we go for a EV, in a very macro scale, probably we need to relook about the habit of us. If we copy the Western countries, European countries, America, sir, there is a parking plot, there is EV charging station for each and every employee vehicle. So today we are unable to provide a parking to our employees. There is no point to talk about the EV charging place. So these are certain practical things. Think about, I stay in Bhubaneswar. Today hardly 2,000 EV are there. End of the 5 years, there will be 20,000 EV will be there. The demand faced by the Tata Central DISCOM will have a high rise. In the tariff, they cannot charge more. They will buy power at more rate. They will not charge at more rate. So it is a question and sustainability point of the DISCOM. So there are some alternative to that. I will share that also. But point is that go for the EV, use the clean power, let us reduce the pollution, but not at the cost of the mechanism which we have established, named as a distribution utility and sustainability thereof. So there are 2-3 things about that. With respect to distribution energy registry, the Arun says at the first point, it can be very well managed. The old DISCOM has all the database. It can be transferred seamlessly to the national level registry. In a future also, 100 kilowatt open access transaction is going to take place, or even lesser than that. That can be very useful for that purpose. But apart from that, before adopting this, we have to take a call about whether the entire mechanism is operable or not. Say we had a very aggressive and massive, before about 12 years, the smart grid pilot project was rolled out each and every state. It was with respect to one subdivision of the DISCOM will be rolled out with a smart grid and smart meters. But unfortunately, none of the regulatory commission announced the discounted tariff during the off-peak hours. Because one division, one subdivision cannot operate in a different tariff in a one utility, one distribution company. And later on, what has happened? The new consumer were added there, they were without smart meter. So end of the day, if I am an analyst or I am a deputy engineer of the DISCOM, I cannot analyze my FIDE losses because some meter doesn't report, some meter reports. So almost more than 200-300 crore rupees of the government just waste. It does not bring the desired result. So my point of bringing all this thing to you that let us have a counterbalance of regulatory provision, whether it is feasible for a small DISCOM, then and they will do it, otherwise we don't do it. Otherwise we do it for one entire distribution company with a spare meter, spare technology. So at least that one distribution utility will have a smart grid features. So these are certain things we need to keep in mind before we think about very drastic change. And probably in our country, the analogous and symphony and the synchronization between various utility authorities and decision makers are not in line, or probably there is a mismatch. It may get settled after a couple of years of bitter experience. This is what I intend to convey. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mehta. This is what is called as a reality check. So, thank you. I think you raised quite a few pertinent issues with respect to the regulations, the tariffs. I think it's the perfect time for me to invite Ravi, who has been with the Regulatory Commission for now at least, yeah, he's a seasoned batsman in regulatory space, at least a decade of experience in this space. So the couple of things, which I would like you to touch upon. One is, of course, the regulatory issue which Mr. Mehta raised. But apart from that, the smart grid regulations which Forum of Regulators, some states have come up with. How does one really look at the data issue, if you can throw some light on that? Because here we are talking about, transporting data to one central agency, okay, or some of the private agencies, making data available. So if there has been some discussion on some of those issues. So yeah, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think after my previous speakers, like going with the dreams and giving a reality check, now it's a regulator's job to find the match between the two and at least see what can be achieved. So it's a difficult job for regulators. It has been a difficult job for regulators, I'm sure. And with such kind of a complexity into the power sector, with instead of a one direction kind of a flow, having multiple direction flow, having prosumers, having all distributed energy resources, the role of a regulator is going to be really more and more critical and tough. And I'm sure the regulators here in India, like in other countries, are trying to prepare themselves and learning like any other stakeholders here in power sector. So from my perspective also, I'm going to give my own original, my personal kind of a viewpoint, not necessarily the regulators. But of course, as I said, work with the regulators and being a senior advisor renewable energy here in Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, I will try to throw some light what the regulators at the Forum of Regulators, which is again the body forum of all the state regulatory commissions of electricity here in India, have been discussing over a period of time, and which is of course visible through their number of meetings and the minutes of the meetings happening regularly among these regulators and regulators. So yeah, definitely I think as everyone has said, with such kind of an ambitious targets of renewables, having a distributed renewable energy sources, we need to prepare an enabled regulatory framework to make sure that this kind of a dream comes to the reality, but at the same time understand what kind of an affordability do exist and where exactly the regulators or the policy makers trying to target which audience and which kind of benefits we are thinking of. Of course, at the same time, understanding the story of forest and the gardener. So try to be a kind of a balance factor between these two. And if I look into that, I think there have been some couple of steps the regulator have started looking into. I know it's again still a very nascent in the initial stage. Lots of things going to change with more learnings come into these sectors, more learning come on this particular aspect. But nonetheless, I think over a period of time, this distributed energy resources or resources which are coming at the distribution level, low level and the medium level, have been issues for discussions for the regulators. The most of the forum of regulators have already generally over a period of time have reviewed most of their model regulations, which becomes a kind of a reference point for the state regulators to adopt. And many state regulators have been adopting those model regulations which take care of this kind of a technicality and the commercial aspect. So most in 2019-20 also the regulators have brought out with the distributed energy resource model regulations, which most of the states have formally adopted, with of course some fine tuning with respect to the state specific scenario, how exactly the up to what distribution level, transformer level the DR should be allowed, what could be the overall load, as Mehta sir has rightly said, ki whether the connected load can be capped. The consumers up to their connected load should be allowed, but not more than that. So that it becomes, as long as the net metering practice is there, it becomes a main objective of a consumer to replace their own consumption, not rather to feed into the consumer. So as long as that consumer is feeding, trying to replace their own consumption, then you should have some kind of a, what I would say, a promotional incentive kind of a net metering arrangement. But as soon as that becomes a kind of a possibility of getting back into the systems, you can then think of more that energy more in terms of a commercial sense. So you can think of a gross metering or any other commercial mechanism which will take care of not only the consumer or the consumption, self-consumption, but at the same time the issues the local distribution company do face with such kind of a small scale renewable sources. At the same time, I think what has been over a period of time has evolved is that kind of need of an aggregators of such small DR. If I completely, in some sense, personally agree with Mehta sir saying, do we really need a centralization of all these things, or being a kind of a structures which we have adopted over in this for a power sectors, a concurrent subject for the between the state and center, we can also keep the state into the pictures and have some kind of a decentralized. There is no need to be like everything has to be central. We can keep have such kind of a registry developed at the state level also. Of course, you can have a control at the central level, but there is no that concentration or centralization is not going to add value. Apart from, of course, looking at the data at our level, but as I was considering the kind of a visibility, I think the state level registry can also be can also be considered. At the same time, the aggregator overall, considering that each and small 2-3 kW kind of systems cannot be monitored meticulously by everything. So you can think of some kind of an aggregated model, and I think most of the IT solutions which are being presented in my earlier by the most of the panelists are going to be a very interesting solutions, which I can definitely see that there has been a lot of evolutions of IT solutions have been coming into the pictures to take care of most of the problems which are going to be faced in this kind of a distributed energy resource issue, when we are actually going to accelerate more and more such kind of a systems into our system, into our overall power sector. And in that sense, yes, I definitely feel that the kind of a standardization required, the kind of an regulatory enablement required for such kind of a system has to be there, and hopefully the forum of regulators have already started reviewing this model regulations and to take care of all the aspects of virtual net metering, group net metering, and for that matter, the required standard IT kind of a software solutions at the distribution level is being thought of, and will most probably will come in as a form of a model regulation soon for the overall stakeholders to look into. At the same time, I think there is a need to understand the kind of a different business model which can be evolved, which again, as I said, sometimes the utility can lead those kind of a business model to take care and to understand what kind of a different role they now have to provide. They are not only going to supply the electricity, but they also need to be a service provider, and more multiple roles the distribution utility has to take. And that kind of utility lead business model, I think, has to be evolved, and of course, in that, many private models can also be combined and can be actually complement each other. And this, I think, the IT solutions, which I think most of the presenters have presented, is going to be a very much complementary for such kind of a utility or the distribution licensees to look forward and to understand and accept the change which is going to happen nonetheless in the coming future. So more or so in nutshell, what I generally believe is that the regulators will eventually and is coming and understanding the complexity of the sectors and bringing a kind of a standardization and enabling framework for such distributed and innovative sectors and the resources in the coming days. And I just stop there. We'll then answer the questions in the panel.
Thanks, Ravi, for those assuring words that the regulator would look at these issues with more openness and would look forward to developing standards, common frameworks across the country. I think that will be really, really good. In this panel, we have got actually full cricket team. 10 people there on the dais over here, 11 person sitting over there. So I'm going to invite the last batsman, okay, or I would say Anil Kumble of the team. You have got to play a versatile role of accomplished batsman as well as accomplished bowler. Okay, so we have got Astha. She represents International Energy Agency, and she is going to talk about or brief us about the digitalization efforts that IEA is undertaking in this particular space. So over to you, Astha.
Thank you so much, Balwant sir, and good afternoon to all. Being the last speaker on the dais, I think everything has been already said, but good balance that I can create, that's the responsibility I have. So thank you, ISGF, for this kind invitation, and great to be on the panel with such learned people. I just wanted to talk about IEA. I don't know if all of you understand. So International Energy Agency is an intergovernmental agency who's supporting governments around the world through our data analysis and policy advice for clean energy transitions, particularly on digitalization. Our focus started in 2019 when we got a big project from the government of Italy to, and the project was named as 3DEN. So 3DEN means Digital Demand-Driven Energy Networks. So this was a project that was given to us to, to look into and leverage our data and analytical capacity to look into the international best practices that has been there around different countries to accelerate the power sector modernization and also utilize, distributed energy sources that we've been talking about for so long. And the focus, although the focus of the whole study and project was more global, but we had some countries or the emerging economies like India, South Africa, Brazil, Indonesia, China, and Morocco as part of this project. So we're looking at best practice around the world on this. And then during that time, we were also honored. Actually, the same time last year, we partnered with India Smart Grid Forum to look into, and we did a roundtable to similar. This is more like a panel discussion, but more like a roundtable to look into digital tools for DR management. And we brought together experts from Brazil and Australia, because we've heard the Australian example in the morning, in the afternoon from Anand, and in Brazil, because the solar rooftop systems, the number of systems have been just deploying at a very faster speed, and MO because they have come up with a national solar registry. So I think I would first compliment India Smart Grid Forum that they have come a long way, and in a year's time, where they're now discussing with Government of India, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, to formulate that solar PV registry for the country. So really my best wishes there. And while we keep talking about, there's so much solar rooftop systems coming in, we've got a renewable energy tracker at the IEA, where we're looking at all the countries and how their renewable energy deployment is increasing over the years. In the next 5 years, what we forecast is that distributed generation will triple almost by 2028. So I think there's a whole, this whole opportunity of moving towards clean energy transitions. We are deploying renewable energy and distributed energy at much faster rate. But what we have also seen, and this 1 year time between when we did the last roundtable with India Smart Grid Forum and now, IEA's efforts also on digitalization has gone further ahead. We came out with a very flagship report on grids, and somebody really talked about the importance of grids, and if we don't keep up on the speed of the deploying grids at the same time, your renewables integration may also become very difficult. So within the role of grids in the energy transitions, we have definitely talked about the development and investments of in transmission and distribution grids that needs to happen, both on the planning side, the need for materials and supply chain, the skilled labor forces, and also on the digitalization. So that report is, of course, available and for you all to look at it. And in that section, we have also provided the importance of digitalization with respect to, looking at targeted funding for digital solutions, policies and regulations for encouraging innovation to promote digitalization, for grid companies to start collecting data and develop tools and the skills to navigate it, and also bringing in transparency alongside privacy protection and enhanced cybersecurity risk assessments. So this is the broader work that we've been doing on this grids report. Then we also convened a workshop last November where we invited people from India Smart Grid Forum to explore international collaboration on fast-track progress on improved use of power system data, enabling interoperability, and paving the way for a demand-driven decarbonization. Also, we are doing some recent work on smart cities through smart grids, which will be presented at one of our G7 meetings. So again, smart grids, digitalization is becoming increasingly focused at IEA's work globally and also for the emerging economies like India. Having said all of that, and I've heard from the ground realities from what Mr. Mehta said, or even our panelist from the Regulatory Commission, I would still say that distributed energy sources are getting deployed at a very faster rate. It's not only distributed PV like solar rooftop, it's going to be electric vehicles, battery storage, appliances, and many heat pumps and many other resources coming online. And considering we've got this national grid, which is, we've got one grid, and if you don't see, if there is no visibility and controllability of these DER resources, then the whole point of energy transitions really, just goes down. And however, for this to happen, what is also important is we look at integrated planning of power systems, both from transmission and distribution infrastructure and the communication system, because ultimately you've got some solutions for smart meters, you've got some solutions for DRs, you've got different solutions here and there, but how they communicate with each other and the sheer volume of data that gets generated. So I think we have already talked about DERMS and other solutions, how we integrate this into our planning for the power system. I think that becomes very important. So with that, I just wanted to close and say that while there are several solutions already available, so there's no dearth of solutions like DERMS or even AI and ML tools. But the starting point that India Smart Grid Forum has already taken, very impressive, is to look at this whole registry, which will be important because ultimately these DERs, when they get integrated to the grid, it's not going to just affect the state level generation, or if there are power disturbances, it's going to be, it'll have an impact on the entire grid when you have power disturbances. So with that, I'll just close, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
So thank you, Astha. I think you have managed to maintain the balance very well. I have got actually strong urge to ask questions to everyone, but I am going to kind of suppress it. But I will open the floor for 3 questions, only 3 questions from the audience, if there are any. Okay? Already there are 2 hands. So yeah, start with lady on my right. Please introduce yourself, and if the question is very specific to a panelist, please direct to the person.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Bindu Srivastava. I have some association with the power sector, and I also worked on some kind of a project where rooftop solar integration was being proposed. I remember that when the rooftop, this policy was being made, there was a plan to remotely monitor the installation and the consumption and the generation at each point through SECI, solar energy, I think
Corporation.
it's called, yeah. And it was also supposed to be used for monetizing, administering the RECs. So now the initiative that ISGF is doing, they're talking about a repository. So is it that the data from the inverter side behind the meter and even for the net metering, will it be tapped by two agencies? Somebody like an ISGF, like the repository, as well as by the, let's say there is an agency which is implementing a rooftop solar for me at my home. So that agency will also normally, they provide a service for running the rooftop solar plant, the installation for me. That is one of the options. So is it that agency as well as the repository would be tapping data, or how would that data flow happen? And what will happen to the RECs? Anybody?
So it's not tapping two sources, as of now at least. I don't know what will happen in the phase 2 or the next ones, but in the present phase, we are planning to interface with all the agencies that are already having the data. So in this case, it will be either DISCOMs or some other DER agency. So it's integrating with the data that is already there. So, but we are not, it's not, see, this space is all evolving. So because of the, we have some kind of a, information as of now. On the basis of that, we are making some changes and information is flowing. But this is going to evolve because as some of the panelists did mention, this is not really helping. So in that case, the metering will be having some load balancing algorithms. They will be updating, making themselves smart. So in that case, we may be doing it at the smart metering level also.
Okay, so that means this is more like an MIS, whereas the operations part will remain with the entities already notified.
Yeah, right now the focus is on making the data correct.
Okay, MIS type, thank you.
I have been warned, so this is going to be the last question. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Please take up the question with the panelists directly.
Yeah, good evening, friends. My name is Murugesan. I was the Director General, Central Power Research Institute. And way back in 2002, I set up the first smart meter laboratory in this part of the world. And I mobilized to work with the BIS to bring in 15959. And under my chairmanship, 16444 was released. I deeply involved with that. And I worked with APDRP, RAPDRP, and so many things. And Mr. Mehta mentioned about experimental smart grid, things like that. If you look at it, we started maybe about 15 years ago, and we don't have credible smart grid implementation. The reason is that people still not understood the standardized way of implementing because of various business interests. In fact, it took about 12 years to bring in 62056, that is 15959. 12 years in India, though 62056 was existing from 1998 onwards as an IEC standard. So still various various building blocks, like 10 building blocks are there for smart grid. People are not going from meter to next level. They stop with the meter. So friends, the thing is now, of course, I have retired and I am also a professor, and I go on teaching the people that there are existing standards are available. There is no necessity to invent it. Absolutely, there is no necessity. One particular document is that IEC, people can note it down, IEC TR 63097. This particular technical report talks about all the building blocks of smart grid. and about 250 plus standards are available. So we need to adopt, simply blindly follow the standard, because we have the mandate that either we have to adopt BIS or international standard, electrical standard, IEC or ISO only. Nothing else. Even IEEE is not considered as a standard unless adopted by IEC or BIS. So even I saw some slide presentation with IEEE. We should avoid it because already people are confused with that. Either BIS, IEC or ISO. Only 3 standards should find a place in your specification. And this 63097